Welcome to the Relationship Series podcast. My name is Ankush Jain, and each episode I'll be speaking to a different state of mind expert on the subject of relationships. Enjoy. Welcome to episode 15 of the Relationship Series. This week I'm joined by Dr Cheryl Bond, who has worked as a trainer and in organisational development for over a decade at one of the leading defence companies in the world, I would say. She's been learning the principles behind state of mind for a number of years and sees how these principles impact all kinds of relationships, both business and personal relationships. So welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Me too, and I always like to start these interviews with my relationship to the interviewee, and Cheryl was incredibly helpful to me when I first started my journey, and I was delivering a training course to the organisation I was working in. Oh God, I think it was a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And Cheryl's just someone who really is able to translate these principles into a business-friendly context, and it was really helpful to me to have a conversation with you, and it went really well. So thank you for that, and I'm glad that we're getting to have this conversation.
You're welcome. It was fun.
So I guess if we just jump straight into it, what's been some of the key insights you've had around relationships, both in the business world and I guess outside of the business world, that these principles that you've learned about behind state of mind point to?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I was fortunate enough when I was working for the large Department of Defense contractor to be able to go to a 4-day intensive where I learned about the principles behind state of mind. And that was back in 1999. The very first person that I worked with was Dick Bettinger. I went out to Washington and spent a wonderful 4 days with him. And I didn't really know what to expect. I was a little bit nervous, even though people in my company and my boss, the people in my department, we were definitely working with state of mind in the business, teaching people how being in a better frame of mind throughout the day would be more helpful in terms of business success, as well as to help them have a better personal life. So the very first insight that I had, it seemed like a small insight at the time, but it really changed, it really shook my world. It changed my relationship with my family, and it also changed my relationship with a very good friend of mine. So here's what happened. One of the things that I realized while I was talking with Dickon is that I always saw everything in the world through a rather judgmental filter. I was always kind of evaluating things, evaluating myself, evaluating other people. I had a lot of ideas about how things should be and shouldn't be, and what I should do and what other people should do. And one of the things that I noticed when I was talking to Dickon was that I had essentially abandoned a very close friend of mine who was the first person I met when I went to college. She was an extremely good friend throughout my college years. She was one of my roommates. And when she graduated from college, she got married right away and had a baby. And somehow, in my judgmental thinking, that was some kind of a big betrayal to all of our lofty ideals about women in the workplace and women being able to have big roles in corporations. And so it was almost like I shunned her. I just didn't hang around with her anymore. And when I was sitting with Dickon, that realization hit me like a ton of bricks. And I just burst into tears, and I said to myself, "Oh, what have I done? What have I done to this relationship? This is awful." So when I got back from my intensive, I called her house and I spoke to her husband and I said, I just need to apologize to Ruth. I've been so wrong in the way that I was dealing with her, and I really just want to talk to her and get reconnected. And it was almost like when you come to people with that sort of humility, there's nowhere to go. And so I just got embraced with so much love from both of them. It was like, we're just so happy that we're all back in one another's lives. And, fast forward another decade or so, and my pal Ruth is a grandmother. She has a wonderful daughter and son, and I'm very much a part of their lives. They're like family. So, I mean, that's pretty amazing that happened. The other thing that happened was I had that same kind of who do you think you are and what are you doing thinking about my brother. I have a younger brother who in his youth had quite serious drug and alcohol problems. And so, of course, the judger, me, who sees everything through a what's right and what's wrong filter, I'd pretty much cut him out of my life. And he had really sort of popped out the other side, the way our wisdom and intelligence will do. And he had made an incredible life for himself. He was a very successful businessman and had a wonderful wife. And so I just reached back out to him. And when I visited my mom, I stopped by, and it's just amazing how that one insight changed the whole dynamic of our family, because I'm a very influential, I guess I have a strong personality. And so my really embracing my brother like that, just, it changed everything. It changed the way my mother saw our family. It changed the way my sister, saw our family. So they're two little insights that happened a long time ago, but they really, really changed my whole world.
And what that really points to me is that you said that you saw people through a judgmental filter, but isn't that how I guess we all see people through a filter? Or, we had a bit of correspondence before the interview, and you said that we always see people through our thinking. Could you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So that's kind of the bigger insight that has helped me a lot in the work that I do in business. And it's one of the first things that I try to help people see when I'm doing coaching in business. And I've been doing quite a lot of coaching lately. So the fact that we see people through our thinking, through first of all, we see them through our thinking at a very elementary level, that if somebody isn't in my thinking, then they're not even really there, and vice versa. If there's someone that you don't get along with, they can be 100 miles away, and you can manufacture such an experience of them through your thinking that you get all riled up and upset when they're 100 miles away. So what I try to talk to people about is that this judgment that I saw was one of my, what I call vabes. Other people call them vabes as well. That we all have values, assumptions, beliefs, and expectations. But really, that's just thought. They're just thoughts that we've built up over the years. How we think about work, how we think about family. And everybody has a set of those kinds of thoughts that look really ingrained. They look like they're concrete. But really, at their essence, they're no more powerful than me thinking right now that maybe I'll have another cup of coffee when we're finished talking. But we believe that they're our truth. And when people realize that that's how they experience the world and other people, it makes us, for me at least, it helped me to be a little more humble and compassionate and curious about, well, what does make sense to the other people that I'm interacting with? Because if I'm trying to build a relationship with somebody, if I'm trying to get rapport with somebody in business, or if I'm trying to build a relationship with a new friend or a new possible partner, I have to understand the world according to them, what they see, what makes sense to them. And so when I tell people that getting rapport requires them to be curious about what makes sense to the other person, that's the basis of that. And so then the second step there that I think people have found incredibly helpful, and me too, is that people are always doing what makes sense to them in the moment. Now, everybody has seen this in the context of state of mind. When we lose our bearings, when our state of mind drops, when we get anxious or angry or upset, it's like there's a lot of static in the connection between our wisdom and common sense and our mouths, at least for me anyway. So sometimes when we're upset, we say stupid things. But everybody does it. It's the universality of the principles behind state of mind are what give me so much hope for relationships and rapport, because I know that when people are upset, they're talking ragtime, and yet we sometimes take it personally when people get upset. And I'll give you an example. I'm currently coaching a young man who is in a customer service situation. And when he was talking to me this week, he said, well, I have this customer, and every week they call me, and they know that I can't do what they're asking me to do. So get a sense of his tone. This is his tone. So I don't know why they call me every week. I think they're trying to get away with something. I think they're trying to pull something over on me. They think that somehow I'm going to manufacture what it is that they need every week. And that's just not right. So imagine how he comes across to them every week. And he wonders why they keep calling him back. It's because they don't think they're being heard. There's no connection there. And so I said to him, well, Joe, why do you think they do that? You know, that they're doing what makes sense to them in the moment. They don't sit there and pick up the phone and say, hey, I think I'll try to pull one over on Joe today because I think he's not that bright, and I'm going to try to take advantage of him. They're just trying to run their business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it so makes sense. And I was having a very similar conversation with a colleague of mine who was getting upset about an ex-colleague contacting her and looking for a job but being very negative. And she was like, oh, all she does is talk about herself, and she was getting quite upset about it. And I love what you said, because I just said to her, I said, do you think she tries to be annoying on purpose? And again, it's pointing to the same realization that your clients, people were not doing it on purpose, and my colleague, the person she was talking to, wasn't thinking about trying to be annoying on purpose. They're just trying to do the best they can do, like everyone is.
Yeah, that everybody does their best in the moment based on what makes sense to them, and that you can tell people a tip and a technique. Like you could tell people, well, in order to get rapport, you need to be a really good listener, and you have to be interested in the other person's point of view. Well, why? Like, why would that make sense to somebody? But if you can get somebody to have a realization that, no, everybody isn't seeing this situation the same way, that people have a different take on what's going on because they experience the world through their thinking. They create their world through their thinking. And so that does, when people start to see that does two things for them. The first thing it does is, to me, it can help to spark that healthy curiosity that's at the root of really reaching out to get rapport and build a relationship with somebody. That if it's an honest curiosity about what makes sense to them while they're trying to do their job or trying to be a parent or whatever, that makes it easier for me to be a little bit curious about them. The other thing that recognizing how our human mind works does is it lets me see that I can always have a new thought about any person or situation, and so can they. So it puts this incredible hope into any relationship. So I could be annoyed with my husband about something in the morning, and yet somehow throughout the day, and this has happened a lot, I'll be working in my office and all of a sudden I'll be overcome with such a feeling of love and gratitude and appreciation for him. And that I want to, sometimes I text him. I'll text him in the middle of the day and say, I love you. And it's because in that moment, that's the experience that I was having of him. Just grateful for everything he brings to our relationship, and so thankful that he's in my life. And yet 5 hours before, I was annoyed with him about something. And so realizing that we're always having new thinking about everything, ourselves, other people, and when we have faith in that, we bring an incredible faith and understanding to every relationship that we have.
I want to kind of go a little bit away from the business side now, because I love that. May I ask how long you guys have been married for?
Oh, you're gonna die. I have been with my husband for over 40 years.
All right. And
we met in college.
What I hear, wow.
Yeah.
And what I hear from what you're saying is that even after 40 years, you've got such a deep, loving relationship which is connected, and even though you have your moments, you come back to that love and connection. And that is quite unusual, and it's something I've asked a lot of the people I've interviewed who have been teachers of these principles behind state of mind, that it's not normal when I look out into the world for people to be together for decades and decades and decades and still be so loving and connected. And what do you put that down to?
Well, I'm always learning. I think that there's something that I've been reflecting on in my own understanding in the last year or so, and that's is there a difference? How do you know the difference between contentment and denial? And so sometimes, and I bet everybody does this, everybody who's been in a long-term relationship does this, all of a sudden you'll start thinking about, something will trigger it. For me, it's how old I am. And all of a sudden I start thinking, is this the relationship that I want to have for the rest of my life? Like, wouldn't I like to have some different things than what I have right now in this relationship? And before I know it, I've sort of gone off on this tangent where I'm about ready to pack my bags and throw in the towel. And this has happened numerous times throughout 40 years. In fact, we've been married twice, because the first time we got married, we were very young, and we made a lot of mistakes. And then we got divorced real quick, and we were apart for a year, and then we got back together again. So there's been a lot of ups and downs in my relationship, and what I found is that if that little judgment filter is still there. I still sometimes think about, well, what are relationships supposed to be like? And then you look at somebody else's relationship and you think, wow, they go golfing every day together, or they just love sports and they watch sports together all the time. And so then you can start to think, well, I don't do anything with my husband. I bike. He doesn't like to bike. He loves sports and baseball, and I could really care less about those things. So you start making you start building this case, and then you realize that what's really important in your life, and the things that are really important in my life are, number one, I'm a homebody. I'm not the kind of person who wants to go off and see the world. I love southern New Hampshire. I love being in my house and working in my yard, and nothing in the world makes me happier than my situation with my husband and my dogs, and being able to take my dogs out in the woods for a few hours. And so that's what works. So the fact that we're not together all the time doing exciting things, and that's not important. And the other thing that I realized that I think is huge for people in relationships, in business and in their personal life, don't think that somebody else is going to automatically figure out what you're thinking and what you want, because they're not. If I want my husband to do something with me, like go to a concert or take a walk with me, I just have to ask, and he does it. But sometimes I think, well, he should just do these things automatically because he loves me. And that's just not true. So sometimes I'll get into a space where I just start thinking too much. And when that thinking quiets down, and I'm just by myself, looking out the window, sitting with my dogs, I realize this is happiness for me, and that's what counts.
Thanks for sharing that. I love when people I'm talking to share their own personal stories, and I was just smiling as you were sharing that with us, and I'm sure it's quite a universal thing. I know in all relationships that we have, whether they're business relationships or personal relationships, we can feel that it's very unique to us. It's a very unique situation, and actually, when I heard you speaking, I was like, oh, I wonder how many people can relate to exactly what you've said and have gone through. Yeah.
I think that everybody gets caught up sometimes thinking about themselves in relationship to other people, and doing comparisons, whether they can be so innocent, but then you kind of get carried away with it, and you get a thought in your head, and you can just go crazy with it before you realize, wait a minute, what's really important to me? And then it just gets crystal clear, and once that's crystal clear, then you know what to do.
Yeah, it reminds me of the fact that in any situation, and especially true of relationships, the more I try and figure something out, the more confused I get. And that's normally an indicator that I'm not going to get the answer from that state of mind.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, we'll get to talking. I'm sure this happens to you. And people will start talking about a relationship and they'll say, when they're in a downswing and they'll think, I think I should leave him, or this isn't right, and he treats me this way, or he's that, or he's that. And they say, it's sort of that, should I stay or should I go? People get to that point and they say, well, Cheryl, how do you know? How do I know what I should do? And there's no prescription other than to just trust your own wisdom, and that when you realize that all the thinking that you have about your relationship, this just helps me to think that all this really serious thinking that I could have about my relationship, it's really made of the same stuff as the thought that says, geez, I'd really like some chocolate right now. And I don't have any chocolate downstairs. Should I go to the store? It's the same stuff. But somehow we have these things in our lives that we label as serious. And then we take any thinking that we have about them as being so much more important than should I have a cup of coffee or have a cup of tea.
I remember once I was really trying to figure out whether I was in a situation and whether that was my wisdom or whether it was just unhelpful thinking. And I spoke to Don, who I did the last interview with, and he said that, or he asked me, is wisdom ever accompanied by a bad feeling? And would you agree with that? Because I said no.
Well, yeah, it's kind of interesting that, because the only thing that we have to describe our feeling is our words, and words are always up for grabs. So when I say a bad feeling and when you say a bad feeling, it could be two different things. So you kind of know yourself. I usually tell people that if you make a decision that comes from wisdom and common sense, there's a sense of relief there. And if you don't, then there's not. And you just stay caught up. You just stay caught up in your thinking, and you just keep churning and churning and churning. That, this last time when I was thinking about my relationship, and when I had that realization and said, oh, just calm down, will you please? That don't be doing so much thinking about yourself and your relationship. As soon as I realized that, I had such a sense of relief that I knew that came from my wisdom.
You've mentioned wisdom a few times. We talked about wisdom, and you also mentioned in our correspondence about incredible intelligence. Would you say that wisdom, incredible intelligence, common sense, they're all the same thing?
I think that there are ways that people describe something, and I think that was the other huge realization that I had way back in those first training sessions that I had working with Dick and Bettinger. And that was that for my whole life, I had felt like I was alone. Like I had to do everything all by myself. That I had to figure it out. That I had to soldier through. And I realized that no, I'm not all by myself. That I'm connected to this incredible intelligence that's behind all life. And it's so much more intelligent and powerful than anything that I could come up with myself. And it just felt so good to be able to say, I'm not alone. I don't have to figure out everything all by myself anymore. And if I'm stuck, all I have to do is just sort of have faith in what's going on. And, people have different ways of explaining it, putting it on the back burner, turning it over to God. Whatever it is, that just clicked so big for me.
We're almost out of time. It's just flown by, and there was one question I wanted to ask you before we finished. Mm-hmm. And I heard an interview with you I think a couple of years ago, and something I remember driving. I even remember where I was when I heard this, funnily enough, and you said something about fun.
Oh yeah.
And that really struck me. And you were asking someone, is it fun being you? And I know you've also talked about in your own way. Could you talk a little bit about how fun and relationships go together for you and what that means for you?
Yeah, that's kind of funny. I think sometimes people have such a sense that relationships are work, that when you think about fun, to me, and this is just because I was so intense and such a worker, I was always working on everything, working on myself, working on my relationships, that when I say that after I learned about the principles and when I learned about state of mind, it was more fun to be me. And that meant me everywhere, me in my relationships, at work. And it wasn't always fun, but once you sort of realize that you can lighten up and still be okay, that was big. That was huge for me. Like, just lighten up. It will be okay. It will work out. And when I went through a really hard time in my life, when my job at the company I loved was eliminated, those same principles behind state of mind are why I was able to pop out the other side, because I knew that eventually I would be okay, and that just being okay and lighthearted, that's fun for me. And I knew that would happen again, that's how the system works. It's perfect. And if we don't fool around with it, it will be more fun to be us.
It's so funny how, I read online or read everywhere else, or you hear people say, you've got to really work at relationships. And I remember when I heard the interview with you, it kind of turned that on its head for me. And it really did point me back to, actually, is this fun? Whatever relationship it is. And I certainly started to bring a lot more lightheartedness and fun into all of my relationships. And that kind of really points to so many things, whether that's in your own personal relationships with family, loved ones, better halves, or even in business with we always talk about getting into rapport with people, and having fun is a great way to get into rapport with people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So thanks for that. This has been a fun interview.
Yes, you're welcome. It has been fun.
If people want to get hold of you, if they want to get in contact with you, if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way that they could do that?
Sure. They can get in touch with me. They can go to my website, which is www.essentialresilience.com, and they can email me at cb@essentialresilience.com. And I love to Skype. I love to talk with folks, so I encourage anybody who wants to have a conversation with me to reach out.
Fantastic. And people can get hold of me through my website, which is ankushjain.co.uk. It's got links to my Facebook, which is facebook.com/AnkushJain Ltd. It's got links to my Twitter, which is @AnkushKJain, and you can also message me from that. Thanks a lot, Cheryl, and I'll speak to the audience next time. This was the Relationship Series podcast. If you like this episode, please share it and leave us your feedback online. Thanks for listening.